Does the U.S. Constitution protect speech that encourages people to break the law under that Constitution? I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, this is an interesting case, and the Supreme Court has decided to take it up. They're taking it from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which effectively said that there is a law that has been drawn too broadly and could be used to ban what should be protected forms of speech. The case involves one Evelyn, and I'm going to botch the pronunciation here. It's Sineneng. So Evelyn Sineneng-Smith. She offered to enroll unqualified illegal aliens in a Department of Labor program, and she was running a business charging $6,000 for her services, knowing that her clients were not qualified for this program and would be rejected. Now, the government, of course, says that she scammed them and also that she induced them to remain in the country illegally. Now, ultimately, Evelyn pleaded guilty to tax fraud and also was convicted of mail fraud and of inducing illegal immigration for financial gain. But the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is all appointed by Democratic presidents, called the statute overly broad because it criminalizes protected speech. I'll give you a couple examples, Bill. For example, an attorney encouraging his client to remain in the country pending his legal case, or a speaker standing up and encouraging illegal immigrants to stay, or a grandma begging her grandson to overstay his visa. All of these have been found to be protected forms of speech. First of all, Bill, let me just ask you, do you think all of those should be protected forms of speech?
Yes, I think American citizens should be able to stand in public and say, I think these illegal aliens should be able to remain in the United States. I think grandmothers should be able to encourage their grandchildren to live in the United States, even if it's illegally. I think the relationship between a lawyer and a client is the relationship between a lawyer and a client, no matter what the status of the client is. All of these are straw man arguments, got nothing to do with anything. The situation here is not an issue of protected speech. It's an issue of fraud. Look, I cannot.
Well, the court dealt with the fraud separately. The court did nail her for the fraud, both mail fraud and tax fraud, and they also said that she was encouraging illegal immigration for financial gain. The problem is that she essentially, they're making the claim that it's her free speech to encourage people to stay in the country while they're here illegally, and that is permissible in other circumstances. So basically, the Ninth Circuit was trying to get the Supreme Court to focus in on this statute and say, basically, hey, we run the risk of banning kinds of speech that should be protected under the First Amendment.
No. The reason that this ruling was made in the first place was because the speech that was being inhibited on her part was the speech, the freedom to speak about the details of how to run this fraudulent scheme. That's not a violation of her civil rights. She's the one who's violating the laws of this country, not the ruling. If I go out there and I tell you I'm selling something and I don't own, and I take your money, I've committed fraud. That does not mean that I get a right to go out there and claim to be able to sell things that I don't own and then scream it's a free speech issue if it turns out that that's not the case. So, to the degree that the court is deciding to look at this, is they have taken, as usual, they have cherry-picked a series of individual steps in a criminal process, individual steps of which, if you look at outside of the context of the entire process, are certainly protected speech, but certainly when you put them in line with all of the other criminal elements that precede and follow it, it's not an unreasonable decision at all on the part of the court. If this person wanted their free speech ability to say whatever they wanted to about anything, they might have thought about that before they started taking people's money.
So clearly the Ninth Circuit is taking a view of this statute in view of overturning it because clearly they want agencies, churches, activists to be able to say, not just in general to immigrants, but specifically to individuals, you should stay here in violation of U.S. law, and I am not culpable for telling you that because I am free to say these kinds of things. Are you saying that the person who encourages the naive immigrant coming into the country to stay is not guilty, but that person who does stay must bear the full burden of the guilt of that situation?
Obviously. If I incite you to a criminal act and you then commit the criminal act, you're the person who's in trouble, not me. You can, if you want to make a society where people are perceived as automatons who do exactly what the last thing they heard was, well, you can find examples of societies like that and an awful lot of mass graves next to them as well. To say that a person who broke the law is somehow not guilty because I told them to break the law is kind of like what our parents told us when we were 3 or 4 or 5, right? If Johnny jumps off a cliff, would that mean you jump too? I mean, really, do we have to return to fifth grade in order to please these progressives who can't seem to understand the fundamental basics of right and wrong? Is that what we're really doing here? I don't believe that this is even up for discussion. The entire thing is about, look, what the Ninth Circuit Court wants, Scott, is they want illegal immigrants in America to vote. That's what they want. That is their objective. It's the objective of the Democratic Party. It's the objective, certainly, of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Every single attempt to make voting limited to citizens through use of ID or whatever the case may be, securing the borders, those kind of things. Every single one of those attempts has come from Republicans, and every single attempt to block that and allow people not only into the country illegally, but to vote illegally, that's all Democrats. And they need to do that because it's pretty clear now, and it's getting clearer every day, that they need to import people to do the job that Americans won't do, which is vote for Democrats.
Well, it sounds to me, Bill, like you're standing up for the right of those people to do this. You're actually defending the free speech of the Democrats to bring in as many illegal aliens and have them stay as long as possible until maybe
exactly
eventually they get some sort of amnesty.
That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm defending the free speech of an American to say what he wants to say. Him saying what he wants to say, he or she saying what he wants to say, is not a violation of law. Even if they're inciting others to violate the law, that's not a violation of law. That is protected speech. But if I'm using that defense to get out of a case of fraud, which is dependent on me lying to people for criminal gain, then that's not a free speech issue at all. Seems pretty clear to me.
Granted, I believe that the case that this woman is in, her hands are dirty in a variety of ways here. So this is not some sort of pure free speech case. However, Bill, the Supreme Court, which now has a majority that was appointed by Republican presidents, has agreed to take this case up. They don't take many cases. What do you think the motivation of the court could be in analyzing a case like this?
Maybe they want to put the issue to bed. A great deal of jurisprudence is based on precedent. It's based on what a previous court has already ruled. And precedent carries a lot of weight in our legal system. It takes a much greater effort to overturn a previously ruled decision than it does to get a blank decision. So perhaps one of the reasons why the Supreme Court is taking it is because they want to look into this issue and get this situation straight, get a precedent on record for it. Your right to free speech is your right to free speech. You do not have a right to criminal enterprises. And if you're trying to say that in the course of a criminal enterprise, your free speech is being inhibited, then you've missed the point. It's not your free speech that's being inhibited. It is your ability to continue to commit criminal acts. What
if a government employee or a congressman were to use that freedom of speech to encourage an illegal alien to remain in the country in violation of U.S. law?
Scotty, come to California, man. I mean, it happens here many, many, many times a day. When Gavin Newsom says that we are not going to close the southern border, that we are going to be a sanctuary state, then that is him saying to illegal aliens, come here against the law. And the idea that you could even ask a question like that is kind of amazing to me. It is one of the things that we see on a daily basis. Anytime a politician talks about a sanctuary city, the sanctuary that they are talking about is a sanctuary away from U.S. law. We hear this from politicians all the time. And I don't think those politicians should be shut up. I don't. So I think they should be defeated.
So if it's okay to speak publicly and the government should not persecute you for expressing your views on anything, what if somebody stands up and advocates not only generally, but specifically to a group of people or individuals for the violent overthrow of the United States government?
Now we're talking about sedition. And I have to tell you something. I am much more worried about the loss of our right to free speech than I am about sedition. Much more worried about that. If you had to ask me what the greatest threat to the republic is, either the entire idea of free speech being thrown out the window or the idea that free speech could be used to incite a revolution, this is a no-brainer for me. So sedition is problematic on its face because sedition is the line that has been drawn between allowable speech and non-allowable speech. And I'm not entirely sure I see where that line is. I really don't know if I see it.
Well, and one wonders where the line is, especially given the fact that this country was founded on such an act of sedition.
Yes, precisely. Now, the country was founded on an act of sedition that was broadcast in broad daylight and made not only legible but inevitable to the eyes of King George in the person of John Hancock. But yes, this is why I have very mixed feelings about sedition. And if I had to pick a side to come down on, I would come down on the side. If I had to pick between the risk of sedition versus the risk of the assault against free speech, I would say, hey, say whatever you want to. Say whatever you want to. I'd much rather go down that road than go down the road of, well, you can say anything you want to except for that. And we have a kind of a definition of that, which may apply to any number of other things. I mean, Gavin Newsom, as an example, when he says that he's going to open the southern border of California and that he is going to welcome illegal aliens into the state he is the governor of, in my opinion, that is a fairly strong argument for a seditious statement. That is a statement designed to undermine the government of the United States of America. There's no question about that. So, do I think that Gavin Newsom needs to be shut up about this? I don't. I don't think he does. I think that risk is much greater. But there's no question that what he is doing, what others are doing, is seditious speech. And so I think the entire sedition loophole is probably more dangerous than the thing it's trying to protect us from.
So, Bill, final question here. You know, we've often heard the phrase, the antidote to bad speech is more speech.
Right.
In this case, if the bad speech is encouraging illegal aliens to remain in the country, and the good speech coming from perhaps Republicans would be telling them to go home and come back in a legal manner, it seems to me, Bill, that bad speech is winning this battle, and I don't see where there's going to be a turning of the tide. Do you? No. Well, I think there might be a turning of the tide, but there's no question that bad speech is winning the battle. But Scott, this is not really a fight between good speech and bad speech. The law has an opinion on this. It's not like this is a completely neutral issue that the law has nothing to say about, and that is entirely determined in the court of public opinion based on what people can rhetorically swing opinions on. The law is very clear. The law is clearly on the side of the people who say that a nation has a right to defend its own borders and that coming into this country is illegal. To the degree that I'm on that side of speech is nice, but it helps to be on the side of the speech that's also the side of the law. Now, unfortunately for all of us, we live in a world now where the law can be broken with impunity if you're a Democrat. And the reason you can break the law with impunity if you're a Democrat is because of the press. It's very simple. The job of the press is to weed out corruption, weed out sedition, weed out anything, shine the bright light of day upon these nasty little dealings that are going on in the dark, this corruption. But they don't do that. They shine the light of day on Republicans, and if there's not a light of day to shine, they'll get a flashlight, and then they'll start making a little puppet show, and they'll do a shadow play, whatever it takes to make you look at something that there's nothing there for. They not only don't look into Republicans, they not only don't grant Republicans any kind of a matter of presumption of innocence, they also are a one-way mirror. Everything that the Republicans do is up for inspection, criticism, and hysteria. And anything that the Democrats do that's wrong is simply forgotten. So that's the world we live in now. But to say that it's good speech versus bad speech in a society that has some fundamental respect for law, which is what really is at stake here above all of this stuff,
our society has made a clear decision about this, as every other society in the history of the world has, by the way. That distinction is, what are you a citizen of? Doesn't have to be a nation. It wasn't always a nation throughout history, but are you a citizen of Athens, or are you a citizen of Sparta, or are you a citizen of Thebes? It matters. And so this idea of citizenship has been there forever. So as far as the ability to just simply say, hey, I think you should go ahead and break the law, to me, that is protected speech, but not within the cocoon of a criminal enterprise. And I think that's obvious to anybody, because if you were to say that you could lie your way out of anything, that you could lie about a contract, lie about things, lie under oath, lie. If you're saying that my ability to lie is protected by my freedom of speech, now you've commingled two things that don't actually belong together. We're not coming after your freedom of speech. We're coming after your criminal behavior, your abuse of the freedom of speech. And I think that no one should be limiting that freedom of speech. But if you decide to use your free speech as part of a swindle or criminal enterprise, then we're going to come after you for breaking the law, not for the fact that you may have said something that you claim is free speech.
So it sounds like, as a free speech absolutist, you're saying to that Democrat, say whatever you please to the illegal alien. As a Republican, you're saying you better say it loud and fast, because we're building a wall and putting that guy on a plane.
Well, that's the first hopeful sign that we've seen. But I think the bigger message is, we should be more worried. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. We should be much more worried that American officials in high places, mayors of large cities and governors of states, have unilaterally decided to take their state out of the union and not enforce what is not a state issue but a federal one. That is a much bigger threat to this country than illegal immigration is, despite the fact that illegal immigration is an enormous threat to this country. And one of the reasons that this thing keeps chasing its own tail like a snake rolling downhill on a hoop is because they serve each other. The Democrats can make a statement that defies the rule of law, namely, California is not part of the United States, come on in. And the reason they can get away with it is because if enough people do that, they will have the votes in California to continue to be reelected. And somewhere, somehow, somebody's going to have to make a pretty tough and important call. And that call is going to be, is California, as an example, a member of the United States, yes or no? If the answer is yes, then it is going to have to abide by federal law, all of it, the same way that every other state has to. And if the answer is no, then why don't we just get that out on the open? Why don't we just get it out and say it? Why don't we just have Gavin Newsom and the rest of these progressives and Nancy Pelosi and all of them, all these California lunatics, come forward and say, hey, you know what? We think that the federal law of the United States is restricting our ability to invite everybody on the planet into our backyard. So we've decided to secede from the union. I think that would be the way to deal with this issue honestly. And because it would be a way to deal with it honestly, forthrightly, and honorably, we will never, ever, ever see that happen so long as people like Gavin Newsom are in positions of power and people like the current press corps are there to defend his every action.
Well, that speech question is now before the U.S. Supreme Court, but that doesn't stop us from chewing on it right here, as we do with other issues 5 times a week, thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com who fund this enterprise and also run their own blog on a private website. You can avail yourself of all the benefits of membership by going to BillWhittle.com and clicking that Become a Member link. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.